What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot to get into today, as we have a guest on our show, and he's a big-time guest. If you were paying attention on New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day if you're on the East Coast, I have a big-time guest, and you're going to want to hear this little interview that I have lined up. Also, this week begins the 2023 NCAA men's volleyball season. I hope y'all are excited because we finally get to see volleyball in action on the collegiate level. We've got a big week of volleyball slated, and I'm going to be breaking down a good portion of the matches. Also, we have more transfer news and more coaching news on the plate as well from the NCAA women's volleyball side, as you already know what the drill is. Hand me a volleyball, set up the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way into episode 175 of Set Point. Without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, we have a special guest with us tonight, or today, or depending on where you are listening from. He is the head men's volleyball coach at Princeton University. He helped guide the Tigers to an amazing EIVA conference tournament championship, and he's just an all-around great guy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcoming the one, the only, Mr. Sam Shweisky. Sam, how you doing, buddy?
Wow, what an introduction. It's a little later for me. I was a little bit tired, but now you fired me up with that incredible introduction. Thank you for having me.
Hey, I appreciate you taking time out of your day, and I understand, it is 9 p.m. where Sam is at, and we're going to try to get through this as best as we can. Without any further delay, let's get on into this interview. But first and foremost, before we get on in, just a little bit of disclaimer here. These are the thoughts and opinions of myself, Teran Rodriguez, and Sam Shweisky, and not the thoughts and opinions of Princeton University, IE Sports Radio, or any third or fourth party organizations. The disclaimer is in the description down below, so just got to get that out of the way. But Sam, the floor is all yours. Please tell these people who you are, how you got into volleyball, and basically who Sam Shweisky is. Take it away.
Okay. My name is Sam Shweisky. I grew up in New York City in the 1980s, 1990s. Played volleyball for Hunter High School and had a great experience there, and started playing volleyball in Central Park and really kind of learned a lot there about volleyball. I went off to Vassar College. I played at Vassar College from 1998 to 2001. Had a great experience playing there. I coached for a year right out of college at the University of New Haven for men's volleyball. Then I went out and I played professionally in Holland for a year. Played libero out in the south of Holland in a little town called Eindhoven, which was great. Came back to the States 2003, 2004. Studied for the GREs. Did some coaching around New York City. And then I went off to grad school at Miami of Ohio. Got a master's degree in sports psychology, and I was a grad assistant at Miami of Ohio for 2 years. With women's volleyball, coached women's club out there for a couple years. And then in 06, 07, I got hired out at UNLV as a second assistant, coaching with the Rebels women's volleyball team there. I was there for 2 seasons. We won the Mountain West Conference Championship the second year there in 2008, or 7, I guess it was. And then 2008, I got hired as a first assistant at UCF, Central Florida, coaching women's volleyball there as well for 2 seasons, or for 2 years, 1 season, 2 springs. And then in the summer of 2009, August of 2009, I got hired at Princeton University to be the head men's coach and the assistant women's coach. And I did both of those jobs for about 6 or 7 years. And then about 7 years ago, I was able to transition fully just to coaching men's volleyball and give up the women's responsibilities, which was great. Not that I didn't love coaching women, but I was able to focus primarily on the men. And I've been here for 14 years. We've won 2 EIVA championships. I've had a bunch of experiences with USA Volleyball. I've been able to be the head coach for the youth national team. I was able to be the assistant on the junior national team. I was able to be assistant with the senior national team. Had some really cool experiences there. And, yeah, love being a Tiger and happy to be here. And had a great fall and getting excited for the spring coming up. Guys just got back to campus today, had our first training, and we can't wait to get going on what should be a great season.
Awesome sauce right there, Sam. Just amazing. Just an amazing, rich tradition of coaching and how you got into volleyball. Just amazing. So how did the volleyball bug first bite you, and who was involved in starting you out in terms of volleyball?
I played in like camp maybe or something like that, like 4th, 5th grade or 6th grade, but it was really in 7th grade. We had a volleyball section in our high school, and Hunter High School went 7 through 12. And my gym teacher at the time, Mr. Fisher, said, hey, you should come try out for the high school team. And he was the high school coach. And I tried out, and I was the only 7th grader there, and I really was kind of outmatched. But he came up to me and he said, look, you're not going to make the formal roster because it's only 9 through 12, but I'd love you to be at practice, be kind of a manager. And he invited me to practice with the team. And that kind of, I loved it. I loved it. And the guys in that team were so generous and so kind to me. Like, high school can be a tough time sometimes. Kids can be mean and stuff, and they were just the nicest and most inclusive guys, and I felt just really loved there. And that really just started my love for volleyball. And so I asked my mom and dad to send me to any volleyball camps I could go to. I started playing in the Empire State Games. Like I said, I started playing in Central Park quite a bit on the cement courts they had back in the 90s. And I just fell in love with it. And then going off to Vassar, that was a great eye-opening experience for volleyball. And just kind of every step of the way, just kind of got more and more entrenched in it. And you know, I love the X's and O's, and I love the science of statistics and all that stuff, but I love culture, and I love the people, and I love the sports psychology aspect of helping players kind of achieve their best potential. So, it was sort of a calling for me. It was the right profession for me to fall into, and I've loved every minute of it.
Excellent. Just absolutely excellent. So you mentioned that you've coached with USA Volleyball and you've coached on the younger side with the youth national team. Who have been some of your most memorable players that you've coached, and have you seen them play either in college or professionally or wherever else?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I coached the youth national team, we went to Cuba and we qualified. We beat Mexico in the finals. We beat Mexico in the semifinals in 5, and we lost to Cuba in the finals. But 2 teams qualified, so we went to Bahrain for World Championships, which is pretty amazing. That team had a bunch of really talented players. Sam Lewis went off to USC, had a great career there. Jalen Jasper went off to a great career at Stanford, and then he actually transferred. He's at Pepperdine now, finishing off, I think, his last year of COVID eligibility at Pepperdine. Great player. Chris Hall was a great setter on that team. He went off to USC. There were some great players. Joel Schneidmiller played on those teams. He went off to UC Irvine, had a great career. I'm trying to remember who else was on those teams. Cole Paxton was a libero. He went off to USC. Brandon Browning was an outside, went to USC. Jared Nelson played on that team. He came out to Princeton to play for us. Devin Jocelyn was an outside, played on those teams. He went off to Loyola, had a great career. So many of those guys, had a great career, went off, played in college. And a lot of those guys had just finished their college career. I had coached with the junior national team in years before that, and some of those guys, like Jeff Jendrick, who had just finished up a great career at Loyola, then went off and, is having an incredible professional career and is now on the national team. Being in and around those gyms and watching guys. I got to coach TJ DeFalco when he was 11 at a Future Select camp. Him and Micah Maha and some of those guys, and watching those guys come up and do their thing and now play professionally. It's really cool to see guys from 11, 12, 14, 16 come through the pipeline and then go to college, have great careers, and then go play, professionally and play on our national team, is really cool to see that. And have a small part, chipping a few balls and kind of watch them grow is pretty cool to see.
That is amazing. That's quite a list of players. And I didn't know you coached TJ DeFalco when he was 11. That's awesome. The more you know, I guess. All right, Sam. So for your experience at Princeton, like you mentioned culture, like how did you first start out with the culture and what was your goal? How were you able to like make Princeton a great culture in terms of men's volleyball?
Well, I was fortunate in many ways. The guy that I came in after, Glenn Nelson, he was a legend. He had been here for 30 years. He literally got hired in 1979, the year I was born, and then I came to replace him in 2009, 30 years later. And he was the head coach for the men and the women. So he coached 30 years of 2 seasons, 60 seasons, which is kind of incredible. The winningest coach, over 1,000 wins if you combine both programs, and just a really iconic, incredible guy with just an incredibly large personality. He's always the center of the room, telling stories, and just kind of people gravitated to him. And I knew some guys from playing in New York that had played at Princeton and played for him, and so I kind of knew what I was walking into, these huge shoes to fill. And so I knew that there were so many things about the culture that he had created that were incredible that I wanted to keep, and a fiercely loyal group of alumni that I wanted to engage. And then I knew, I wanted to there were some things I wanted to change and to kind of do my own style, but I knew that would take time. I knew it had to go slow. And so the first couple of years were really just trying to kind of embed myself in the culture, learn what Princeton's a unique place, learn what Princeton athletics, Princeton volleyball was about. And then over the years, as I recruited more and more guys that kind of shared my vision for what this, new version of Princeton volleyball, this Princeton volleyball era could be, slowly kind of, edge into that. And every couple of years, it felt like we, made some headway in that. And now I'm really proud that we have a beautiful culture that I love what we stand for, what we represent, and what we value and prioritize. But there's so much respect and honor and love for the shoulders that we stand on that came before us and all the things that those teams did. I mean, we're very proud of the 2 championships that we won in the past couple of years, 2019, 2022. But none of that happens if the Tigers don't win in 1998 and beat Penn State. Actually, Penn State in the semifinals, and then they beat Rutgers in the finals. So much a debt of gratitude is owed to Glenn Nelson for starting and running this incredible program, and then for the alums that we kind of come after, for sure.
Taking over for Glenn Nelson, was there a little bit of nerves going into your first season after taking over a living legend who was just absolutely amazing at the time?
Not a little bit of nerves, a tremendous amount of nerves. I was very nervous. I had been coaching predominantly women's volleyball for, 7, 8, 9 years. And I coached men back in New Haven in 2002, and I had done clinics, and I was very interested in the men's game and stayed around it, but I hadn't coached men college proper, head coached ever. And yeah, walking into a legend like that, I was terrified. I was 30 years old. And I was trying to glean as much information as I could from anyone around the program, that I could grab onto. And, it's funny, like the relationships I have with those guys that were in the program, 14 years ago that are now 30 years old themselves, that are now, doctors, lawyers, investment bankers out in the world, have, families and kids and stuff, getting to talk to them and reminiscing and laughing about, kind of the mistakes I made, the things we did, trying to kind of figure out that new time period, was special because we did it together, and they kind of helped me, brand this new era of volleyball. But absolutely. And getting to know Glenn, I mean, we have our fall tournament called the Glenn Nelson Classic. And, there's a lot of things we do to sort of pay homage to Glenn. He comes around and just trying to listen to him and glean insight from him. I mean, he's a brilliant mind. He's been around the game a long time, and he knows how to win at Princeton. So that's something that I've always, cherished. The times I've gotten to pick his brain and get insight from him has been wonderful. But yeah, was I nervous? Absolutely. No question about it.
That's great to hear. And Glenn Nelson, absolutely amazing legend, coach, just absolutely amazing. And the culture that he built. I've seen coaches coach certain programs, both on the men and women's side, on the younger side in terms of high school. But it's for what Glenn had done with Princeton. It's quite amazing. So anyway, over back to you. So in 2019, it was quite the historic season for Princeton as your team managed to actually make it. Well, they first won the EIVA tournament, and they also won an NCAA tournament game and nearly knocked off Pepperdine. So how special was that team? And talk to us about what some of your favorite moments of that team was.
Yeah, that was a really, really special year, obviously. It was sort of my decade. I got there in 2009, and now it's 2019. I've been there for 10 years, and the whole Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, you kind of saw, okay, the pieces were starting to come together, and we had built this core group. George Human and Parker Dixon and Greg Luck, those guys had started kind of as freshmen, and now they were juniors, and, Corey Short and Billy Andrew and Kendall Ratter, we just had, we had a core of older guys that had been around. We had Jared Nelson, Nate Thompson, Brady Webbush, Attila. We had some really youth coming into the program. It was just a really special group. And we battled that whole season. We hosted the championship, the IVA championship. We went 13-1, but, that can be deceiving. We won some games. I think both NJIT games were fifth set, 18-16 or 19-17. Kendall Ratter had 3 aces in one of those games to pull us out of the brink. Some of those were really hotly contested matches. And, getting to win the championship on our home floor was incredible. Fifth set, Penn State, I think it was 15-12 in the fifth. Gym was packed. It was incredible. But I'll tell you, and then going off to Pepperdine at Long Beach and going 5 with them was really special, obviously. But I'll tell you, one of my favorite moments of that whole run was the day we played Penn State in the finals. Earlier in the day, Jonah May, who was one of my favorite alums, he graduated a couple years before. He came up for the game. He flew in for the game, and he got there early. And we went and worked out together, and went and had lunch together, and we're just kind of BSing, and just he just sort of helped take the stress off the moment, because I obviously watched all the film I was going to watch and just needed to kind of take my mind off things, but. Just being connected to him and seeing how many guys, Corey Short, Devin Stearns, all those guys, Alex Schindel, Mike Bagnell, all those guys came up from the city to be a part of this event for that championship match. And it was just really special. It was special to see so many alums emailing and texting, and they were just so proud and so happy that we were able to kind of get back to that national stage after 21 years. It had been since '98. So it was a really special day, and just a special run in general.
So that year you went 13-1 in conference. Now let's jump on back into our time machine and go back to last season. So last season was quite the interesting season. You all finished, 4th in the EIVA, and you had to take on Big Bad Penn State, who was hosting, and you went up 2-0. Then Penn State won the next 2 sets, and then you wound up pulling out the 5th set in a close one. Then you wound up beating NJIT in the EIVA finals. So how crazy was that tournament run? And obviously Penn State was really strong last season. How were you able to just take down a giant like Penn State? Because I've seen Penn State play, and they have some really athletic players.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2 championships that we've won could not be more different in terms of how they were scripted and how they played out. Absolutely. We started out last year rough. We had, COVID, I tried to minimize the sort of speak it out of existence. COVID's not that big of a deal, but it was a big deal. So we win in 2019, 2020 gets cut, nobody plays, but 21 we didn't get to play. A lot of teams played in 21, and us in Harvard and the Ivy League didn't play volleyball, and so we had 8 guys on campus. A lot of guys took gap years, and we trained, played some back row 4s, played some beach. But, last year we were relearning so many things about culture, right? Like, how do we go and eat meals as a team, and how do we go on the bus, and how do we travel with our jerseys, and what do we do? All these lessons we had to learn, and it took a while. And, yeah, we struggled, and we had a lot of talented guys. We weren't sure how the pieces were going to fit, and we struggled quite a bit. And then, yeah, something happened. Ironically, I think it was I got COVID. We played in Ball State. I had COVID, and I couldn't be at the match. And we lost the match, but we played really well. And you could just see this, like, I don't know, this belief. We had played Penn State at Penn State in February, and we lost. They beat us in 3, and we lost the third set. I think it was 25-7 or 9. It was something embarrassing. Penn State played incredible. Penn State was incredible last year. And in February, we didn't really have our mojo figured out. Didn't have a lineup figured out. Couldn't get our groove going, and we got crushed. But that month afterwards, we really kind of went into blue collar mode, and we just started showing up early and putting in the work and just trying to get better. And Penn State came back in March, and we lost in 4. But we took a set, and some of the sets were close, and they had the upper hand, and they were the better team that night, no question. But like we had sort of made up some ground, and you could feel like, hey, maybe if we just keep training and keep trying and keep inching along, getting 1% better each day, who knows what could happen. And then we got into the playoffs, and we played St. Francis the first night, and we played really well, and we beat them, and we're going to the Penn State game in the semis, and it was just the perfect recipe of like, we're not supposed to win. Penn State was 19-0, and they're on a 19-0 run. They were undefeated in conference. They were ranked 2 in the country, and no one expected us to win. We weren't supposed to win, but we thought maybe we could. We thought it might be possible, and we tried to kind of put the outcome out of our mind, just say, hey, let's play hard, let's see what happens. And then everything just, some nights, just the ball falls your way. Like, the ball just fell our way, and it didn't fall their way. Like, that's some nights, like, both things happen. Ben Harrington had an incredible performance. Gavin Leising played tremendous. A bunch of guys really stepped up. Parker Dixon was dynamite. Joe Kelly set an incredible match. It was just a really special. Jared Nelson passed brilliantly. It was just an incredible, incredible night. And then going into the finals against NJIT, it was a much different feeling because it was really 50-50. It was really up for grabs. Like, we have a tremendous amount of respect for that program. I coached Danny Concalves years ago at New Haven. He's married to a good friend of mine from Vassar, and like we know that team very well. We play them a lot, and we know how good they are. And that was a much more tense, stressful match than the Penn State match. Penn State match was kind of like, hey, we're playing hard. If we win, great. If we don't, we're not expected to. And then, the Midget game, it was pretty cool to see different guys come in and make impacts. You had Nero Omena and Brady Webbush play different roles throughout those couple sets and matches. You had Joe Kelly and Henry Webbush play different roles throughout those matches. And, we were down, I think, in the third set, 7-2, 6-2, quite a bit. And we made a double Webbush sub, and Brady Henry came in and just changed the momentum and took over that set and took over the match. And we were fortunate to win. So it was really special, and really cool. And I don't have kids of my own, but I look at championships similarly. Like, they're different, and we love them equally, and we're just really proud and appreciative of those opportunities.
Just a historic tournament run in the EIVA tournament, and then eventually you got to go to the NCAA tournament. But before I go on into that little rabbit hole, obviously you've been to Long Beach, the Long Beach NCAA tournament in Long Beach, and then last year it was held at UCLA, and you were coming from the East Coast. What were some memorable moments or off-the-court moments that you had when you were in California, just because it's a whole 3-hour difference and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the coolest, moments was, we flew out there and we landed at LAX and we started driving, and the guys were hungry, and so we knew we had to get food, and we were kind of looking around. There's an In-N-Out Burger, like literally right when you get out of LAX airport, and so we were like, oh, perfect. That's like, cultural thing, right? They don't have them on the East Coast, so they got them on the West Coast. Let's go do In-N-Out. The guys will love that. And we start pulling up, and we see North Greenville University, like, looks like they just landed, and they're there also. And our guys were like, Coach, I think that's North Greenville. And I was like, perfect. Like, we'll get a chance to, and my guys know, like, I love nothing more than trying to be social with the other team and connect and make it bigger than volleyball. And they're like, oh my God, we're gonna have to go have milkshakes with, NGU. Here we go. And it was awesome. We stood in line at In-N-Out Burger, and we broke some bread with them and shared some burgers and had some shakes. And I got to talk to the coach, who was a really cool guy, Dr. Fred Battenfield, and started the program and it had been there for 8 years, but had been in volleyball for decades and done some really cool things. And him and I got to have some really good chats then, and then at the hotel we were staying at together. And it was just really cool. It was cool to talk to those guys and to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And, we felt like obviously we're going to play as hard as we can and try to win. But win, lose, or draw, we're excited to have kind of made these relationships. So that was a cool moment, cool experience. And then I think just the setup at the championship at Pauley Pavilion, we stayed at this hotel, which was literally a 2-minute walk. Right, it's on campus. I forget the name of it. It's a gorgeous hotel right next to Pauley Pavilion. And getting to play in Pauley, we play there. We play there quite a bit. But it's just such a storied venue, and walking around and seeing the pictures of Grant Taliaferro and Stein Metzger and, Mike Feely and I don't know, all these legends that, I've played at UCLA back when I was growing up and stuff. It was just really cool to kind of be in that arena. And just a really classy, incredibly well-run event. Long Beach was too. I mean, the championships, NCAA championships, they do such a great job of making you feel really special and being a part of it. It was just really cool to be a part of the whole thing.
Excellent stuff right there. And I can imagine it was definitely different from being in the East Coast and whatnot. So before we jump on into the matchup against North Greenville, if I ever want to go to Princeton and check out a volleyball match, where should I go to eat before or after the match?
Well, depends on what you're looking for. I'll tell you, so we just had dinner with the team at this place called Taqueria, which is a nice, great, Mexican stuff, burritos, tacos, stuff like that. My favorite place, there's a few places. There's a place, Triumph Brewing Company is a nice little local microbrew. But my favorite place is a place called Winberry's. It's a little pub. They have great food, great little spot there. There's another place I really like called Metro. That's about a 5-minute drive. But Winberry's is kind of my go-to. They make a great French onion soup. It's a really cedar plank salmon. It's a great go-to. And it feels kind of like, Princeton looks kind of like Hogwarts. And Winberry's feels kind of like some sort of tavern you'd walk into in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's a kind of a cool little spot. That'd be my recommendation.
Okay, yeah. The reason I mentioned that is because I'm down for any food, honestly. So I'll keep that in mind. So last year you all played North Greenville. First time they've been to the NCAA tournament, and unfortunately they kind of made history their way. But what were some positives coming out of that game, and how you were able to just take that little positive from that match against North Greenville?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were several positives to take out of it. I think one was, we similar to the Penn State game where everything was kind of just going our way and not going their way. We kind of fell ourselves in the inverse. Like the ball wasn't bouncing our way. Like we just couldn't get our mojo going. And they were playing great. They were playing with a lot of rhythm and a lot of, a lot of gumption, and it was clicking for them. And we just couldn't get our rhythm going. And then in the third set, we finally caught a rhythm, and we got into, I think it's a record. I would have to check, but the last set, I think we lost 40-38, which I think is an NCAA record for the championships. But that was pretty cool to see that fight. And anytime you get into double digits, extra innings, whatever you want to call it, but like our season was on the line. Like we fought off 7 or 8 match balls. For us, we played 3 or 4 set balls for them. That was a really cool set to be a part of and to fight into the 30s, almost 40-38. And then I think one of the biggest positives to come away from it was just a huge sense of humility. I think the beauty of the Penn State win and of the NJT win and winning the whole thing and comes with a tremendous amount of confidence. And you can dip into the plane of arrogance, and I think that's not unreasonable. When you play that well, you think, "Wow, oh my God," it was really humbling to remember, but you don't always play that well, and you can't count on playing that well. And kind of the kiss of death for a lot of athletes and teams is getting sucked into focusing on the outcome, which is hard. It's just you think about, are we going to win? Are we going to lose? What about this? And when you can just stay present and stay in the moment and just play as hard as you can, that's when true magic happens, right? And that's what happened against Penn State and against NJIT. And so I think there's a beauty in having the humility to remember that it doesn't matter who you're playing, doesn't matter what time of the year it is. Like, the best thing you can do is to not think about the outcome and to play as hard as you possibly can. So, we kind of walked away from that bummed that we didn't get to go further, but had a ton of respect for North Greenville and what they were able to do and put on the court. And, kind of excited to get back to the drawing board this year and try to keep working and try to keep getting better.
I'm certain you all will be back on the big stage. I'm certain you will. So you mentioned in that third set, 40-38. That could basically be like 3 quick sets in terms of volleyball. Like, what were you telling your team at that moment when you were basically just trying to keep yourself in the match and you were having to go neck and neck with North Greenville with your season on the line?
It's a good question. I don't remember exactly, and I have a feeling I probably used up my timeouts prior to that run, right? Probably into the 20s, because you don't usually think you're going to go into the 30s. So I don't even know if there were many timeouts into the 30s. Trying to just project confidence and positivity. And, I think tactically there wasn't a lot to do. James Hartley was having an incredible night. I don't remember the numbers offhand, but everything he touched kind of turned to gold. So I kind of remember just saying, like, hey, let's keep setting that guy. But their opposite was playing really well, and we had a hard time slowing him down. So I think trying to game plan with the staff and trying to figure out if we could make some adjustments to slow him down, but we just weren't having much luck. He was just playing lights out. So a lot of times in those moments, it's just trying to be positive and make small adjustments and keep the guys going forward. I think the harder part was in sets 1 and 2 before we kind of caught our rhythm, was getting the guys to catch that rhythm, because that's a hard thing to create that comfort. And, being on that stage, like against Pepperdine when we played them, I don't know if it was just the mindset or how we walked into it. We had also played Pepperdine. We played them the first match of the year that year, and we'd lost, but like we just had a familiarity and a comfort with them. And we kind of walked into that match going, we can play with these guys. And, not having played North Greenville, not having played any teams from the Carolinas, not really knowing much about their league, watching stuff on film, but, we weren't properly prepared. I take a lot of the blame for that. But sometimes you can do all the preparation you want and you're just not ready to meet the moment. And so it took us a little while into that third set before we could kind of figure it out. And it was just a little bit too late. I mean, I would have loved to have seen if we could have pulled that third set out, what would have happened in 4 and 5, but unfortunately we didn't get that chance. But I don't know. For me, it's a bit of a bitter taste, but it's also like, it's kind of good. It keeps me motivated. It gets me excited to get back in the gym and problem solve and keep working harder,
Before we head on into this season and looking at some of your players, talk about your coaching staff and how special it is, as you have 2 assistant coaches and 2 team managers, and you also have a recruiting coordinator. So talk about your coaching staff before we talk about your players.
Yeah, so my coaching staff, our coaching staff, I had a guy, Pat Schwarn, was with me for 6 years up until the middle of last season, and really was my right-hand man, and we were friends. We played against each other in college. We've known him for 20 years, and by last year, we were really kind of finishing each other's sentences and kind of just, I would think something and he would have done it already, and it was kind of incredible. And mid-season, he got an opportunity to go to Penn State and work there, which he's a Pennsylvania guy, and he played at Juniata, and I kind of knew that was going to be a great opportunity for him, and I had to be supportive of him. And but losing him mid-season was tough, and we obviously had an incredible run at the end there. But once the season was over, it was like I knew we had to find a replacement, someone new to build the staff, and put out a national search, and hundreds of resumes came in, and kind of looked them top and bottom, and kept calling around USA Volleyball and different colleagues and stuff for recommendations. And the one person's name that kept coming up was Lindsey Brown. She'd been at IPFW, Purdue Fort Wayne, for several years and had some really good success there. And she'd been coaching with USA Volleyball. She was assistant with the youth national team and had really impressed a lot of people in the USA Volleyball circuit. And so I was really intrigued by her. And she came on an interview and she crushed it. The guys all really liked her. And we were sort of contemplating if we were going to hire her or not. And then I had a chance to work with her. I had a chance to go to Guatemala with the youth national team and train in Anaheim and then watch her coach. And 3-4 days in, I was like, wow, this coach is incredible. She just sees the game at such an elite level. She sees things technically. Just the other day, we were watching film, and she said, "You see how this is?" And I go, "Wow, I didn't know. Now that you say it, I see it, but I didn't see that at all." And she just has a really clean and precise way that she disseminates information to the guys. They love her. So that was a huge pickup. I was really nervous when Pat left, how we were going to replace that void in our program, and she's come in and she's done incredible things in the fall, and I can't wait. As she gets more comfort and familiarity with me and with the program, with the guys as we head into the season, I think she's going to do things for us that are tremendous. So she's number one at the top of why I think the staff is so special. And then it grows from there. We have a guy, Ben Hancock, who's in his second year as a second assistant position, and he's a young guy. He's in the seminary school here, right by Princeton. His wife's a PhD student here at Princeton, and he played at Pepperdine and got some really good insight and background. But he's just so upbeat and positive, and just really gives the guys a great kind of energy to focus on. Our managers, Mason Tate is just an incredible workhorse. He's a sophomore. I get confused. Sophomore, junior, something like that. But the guy just became fluent in data volley. He codes every practice. He's going to be coding during the games, breaks down film, does statistical analysis, just puts in so many hours for the program and gives incredible insight, which is just incredible. And then we have a bunch of other managers and people that help out with social media and stuff like that. And, it's just great that so many people want to be around Princeton volleyball. We're really fortunate for that and really appreciative.
Awesome stuff right there. So jumping on over to this season. So this season, you have a good amount of returning players, such as Ben Harrington, Nate Thompson, James Hartley. I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Nahiro Owowu. And then some...
So it's Nero.
Nero?
Nero Omena.
Omena. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. So Nero Omena, and then other players to watch for are Henry Wedbush, Matt Sue, and Gavin Lacing. And your only key loss, in my opinion, was Joe Kelly was your setter. So what can you tell us about this year, and what can we look forward to in terms of Princeton men's volleyball?
I just want to because my name gets mispronounced a bunch. So it's Matt Sue and Gavin Lacing, which I think you got most of those. Mm-hmm. We actually lost quite a bit more than just Joe Kelly. Joe Kelly was a big loss, certainly as a setter, but Parker Dixon really was the key catalyst at the L2 position that helped us win the semifinals and the finals. And so losing him is big. Jared Nelson anchored the reception part of the libero position last year for us, so that was also big. So that we have a lot of key returners, but there. I just also want to give credit to some of the guys that played huge roles last year in that playoff run that graduated. You mentioned a lot of the big names. I mean, I'm excited for those guys to see what they can do. I think Nero. We played around a lot last year with him in the middle and opposite at the left side, and we're doing it again this year in the fall. He played left side, right side, middle. We're still doing it today. He played a bunch of positions. So he's so physically talented. He's such a great player. He played this summer on the Pan American team, the U21 team, and they used him. That guy's going to be in the USA gym for the next decade. And I wouldn't be shocked if he has a shot, high up on the senior team. So where he fits in the lineup is probably the biggest pivotal piece, right? Does he play middle? Does he play pin? And then some pieces fall in around there. Like you said, I think James Hartley is poised to have a great year. I think Ben Harrington is ready to make some really big strides. Henry Redbush is he's the guy. He's the guy that's going to be running the show, which we're pretty excited about. But there's a lot more guys that I'm excited to see what they can do. Nate Thompson had some health issues toward the end of last year, didn't get to compete, so I'm excited to see what he can do. Brady Redbush is also a hybrid guy that played a bunch of middle for us last year, maybe on the pin again this year, so that'll be interesting to see what he can do. Alex Murkai is a senior, super talented, see what he can do. So there's a bunch of guys that are going to be battling, and some first years and some new guys that are coming in. So the competition in the gym is fierce, and I can't wait to see what happens when we get out and play some opponents and see, who's able to do what. But it's going to be fun.
I'm really looking forward to this season for Princeton. So I noticed something quite a bit. So as you might know, you probably don't know this, but I'm a SoCal guy, and I noticed a few names. I saw Ryan Venna. I also saw Henry Wedbush, and then last year, if I recall correctly, he is not on this team. So Brady Wedbush. So Brady, Henry, and Ryan Venna, who is on this year's team, they all come from Loyola High School, which I've seen a couple times. So not for anything, but do you happen to know who Michael Boley is or anything of that sort, just because Boley is a longtime coach with the Cubs?
Yeah, I know Michael Boley quite well. We actually have another Loyola guy, Nico Posovac, is a senior libero for us, played for Boley, played for Loyola. Yeah, so when I got here in 2009, and the season was 2010, we had two Loyola guys that were freshmen, Michael Dye and Sean Cotter, and I got to know Coach Boley right then, and we've had quite a pipeline of Loyola guys over the years. Chris Kennedy, I'm trying to think who else. There was one other one, and then we've had this most recent sort of pipeline push, which was Brady Wedbush, then to Henry, then to Nico Posovac, and all those guys. And so, he's an incredible coach. They run an incredible program, and those guys, not only do they come in technically sound, but man, do they compete. Like that program, those guys compete hard. I never have to think twice about a Loyola guy coming in if they're going to compete hard. It is just part of their DNA. And so, we love our relationship with them. Obviously, they're a high academic school, so there's a lot of good fits for us in a lot of ways. We're hopeful to keep that connection going for many years to come.
Excellent stuff. And I personally got to see Loyola last season for the CIF Southern Section Division I volleyball finals. And I got to see how deadly of a server that Ryan Venna is and how much of a beast he can be in the middle. So what did you see in Ryan Venna when you were recruiting him?
Yeah, it's interesting. He has a great arm, such a great arm, and he's kind of light on his feet. He's a big guy. I mean, he's built sort of like a football player, but he's kind of light on his feet. He plays pretty good defense. He's got a good touch on the ball, right? He could actually, like when we do ball control stuff, like he's pretty clean. He's just kind of a nice all-around game and a real even temperament. Like he's a guy that competes super hard, but he just doesn't get rattled. And so, we liked a lot of things when we watched him play at JOs and club and stuff. And then he came on a visit, and he really just gelled with the guys. I think Henry knew it, played with him in club and high school and stuff, and they had a good relationship. But a lot of the guys, we do a lot of our recruiting. We listen to what the guys say. When guys come on a visit and our guys go, this is a good dude. This is a guy that would really fit our culture. We go, okay, we're going to listen to you guys. And he really fit the mold. And so, we're super excited he's here, and we're looking forward to seeing what he can do, these next couple of years. I think he's going to have a big impact for sure.
Excellent stuff. So, obviously, your season opener is is next Monday against Deauville, and you've got a lot of notable matchups on your schedule. You're at UCLA, then you're at Pepperdine, then you play Ohio State twice, and then you've got your EIVA schedule with Penn State, NJIT, and then you've also got Grand Canyon. So talking about the EIVA, it's down to only 6 teams, and that every team is now guaranteed a spot in the EIVA conference tournament. So what's that like, considering there were a few teams that departed for other conferences?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've debated for many years in our conference, how many teams should make the playoffs. For years, we just had 4 teams, and then last year we went to 6. But we had 9 teams in the conference, then we shifted down to 6 teams. We're keeping it at 6. So, I think people have different opinions. My opinion has changed over the years, back and forth. I think a lot of times it's the seat you're sitting in, right, gives you a viewpoint of like, well, maybe this would be better, that'd be better. And you never know, I mean, look, last year we were 4th seed, we won the whole thing. Rare, unexpected, oftentimes wouldn't happen, but it happened. So sometimes all the rest and all the planning and the buys and stuff, end up not paying dividends. So the truth is you don't know. But I think with 6 teams and 6 teams making the playoffs, I think what you'll see is many teams really focusing on growth. Like, how can we keep improving? Because we know that when it comes down to April, the team that is playing the best in April has the best chance to win, no matter what seed they are or whatever the case may be. So I think you're going to see a lot of teams prioritizing, like, how can we keep getting better and see where we can be, come April. But I'm excited. I think it's a strong conference. We played a bunch of those teams in the fall, and they all look really strong. Charleston looks probably the most improved. NJIT returns a lot of players. They're strong. Penn State obviously is very strong. Mason's very strong. All those teams are good and strong. But Charleston really added some nice pieces to a strong team they had. So I think they're gonna. They beat us in the fall at the fall tournament. I think they're gonna give teams some fits this year. They're gonna be good. But it's gonna be a fun battle with all the teams. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and last week I pretty much went over, for the most part, most of the teams as returning players, and I discussed some notes I had for each team, and I said that Charleston is a team that looks to be dynamic, and they return a good chunk of its players from last year. And that's kind of the key when you're competing against teams like Penn State and NJIT. But other matches on your schedule that are noteworthy, I mentioned UCLA and then Pepperdine and then Ohio State. What non-EIVA match are you looking forward to the most, or are you just looking forward to every match?
Yeah, I think they all bring, different things. I'm looking forward to being up in Buffalo. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. We have a guy from Rochester, and we have a couple guys from Canada, so we're going to have some families there. Talking to the Damon coach, he said the match might sell out, so I don't know how big their gym is, but anytime you can play in a packed gym, and if they're cheering for you or against you, it doesn't matter. It's good energy. That's going to be a fun experience. Playing at UCLA obviously is really cool. We've done that, I think, every year for the past several years, almost decade probably. That's a cool place. We're not playing in Pauley, playing in the Wooden Center, but actually we've won in the Wooden Center against them before, so that we'll take it. We'll play there anytime they want to play there. But they're going to be super talented this year, and that should just be really a lot of fun to play them. Pepperdine is awesome to play. It's a great gym and a historic place to play. We're playing Concordia Irvine, which is a really strong team, and they got a great coaching staff, and so that'll be fun to play them. The Ohio State matches are going to be awesome. I'm really close with Kevin Birch. Him and I worked together with USA Volleyball for many years, and I've never been to the new Ohio State Arena, Corvelli Center, I think it's called, something like that, but I'm really excited to see that. I've heard it's incredible, so that'll be a really fun trip. The GCU trip's going to be great. We're excited to go out there. We have a couple guys from Arizona, so it'll be nice to get them back home. We're playing Loyola at George Mason at a little tournament deal, so that should be a lot of fun. We don't play very many neutral matches, so that would be a cool opportunity to play them there. I think it's a really nice schedule. It's got a good balance. It's got some really high-octane teams. Cal State Northridge is coming into playoffs at our place, which is pretty cool. We haven't had that many West Coast teams playoffs. We've had a few more in the last couple of years, but Theo Edwards is a great friend of mine. We've coached together with USA for many years, and now in his first year as the head coach, he's been coaching there for many years, but officially the head coach this past couple weeks ago was named, so excited to get him in the gym and get to coach against him in our gym. Should be a lot of fun. So, yeah, really looking forward to it. A lot of really good teams on the schedule, and can't wait to get going.
Excellent stuff right there. I definitely am seeing the schedule, and it's quite nice, and I think some of these matchups should prepare you for EIVA play, especially with some of these teams that return some good, notable players. So I also noticed on the schedule that you won't be having your first home game until the beginning of February, the first-ish week of February when you play Sacred Heart. Obviously, there's conflicts with like men's and women's basketball. Like, was your schedule based on design, or did you like design it that way, or was it because of the whole conflicts?
So we play in Dillon Gym, and our basketball team plays in Jabin Gym, so we don't have any conflicts with basketball. We actually have no conflicts with any other sports. We're the only men's and women's volleyball, only two teams that really play in Dillon. The conflict, not so much conflict, but we don't start classes until I think it's the 28th or 29th of January, and so we can host games when we don't have students in session, but we really prefer to have games when our women's volleyball team is there because they help sort of run the game management for our games. And we have students. We get a pretty good student section and energy in the gym. So when possible, we like to have schedule our matches when we have, the students on campus. So January is a great chance for us to travel and play a bunch of away games, and then we'll start up in February and play some home games. So, that's kind of our usual rhythm, and I think it works pretty nicely.
Excellent. So all the way back in July of 2022, there was news saying that the NCAA tournament is going to be expanded to, I think, 12 teams, if I'm not mistaken, and there will be like 7 automatic qualifiers. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of that, but how excited is it to have more teams be in the NCAA tournament as opposed to previous years?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, any expansion is good for men's volleyball, right? So, it was the Final Four for decades and decades, right? And then it went to 6, and then it went to 7, and any chance to inch it to 8, 10, 12, that's fantastic. And so, there's more guys playing volleyball. There's more teams that have men's volleyball. When there's a chance for more teams to compete, that'd be fantastic. I mean, you look at last year. I mean, obviously we were so thankful and appreciative to have the opportunity to get the automatic bid, but Penn State should have been in the tournament, and so should have UCLA and Hawaii and everybody else. I mean, there was no good answer that someone had to get left out. When we upset our tournament, and then who upset? I forget. Someone on the MPSF side upset, right? And so then there were like 2 at-larges that had to go, to 3 spots. And Penn State had an incredible year last year, and they should have been there. And so I think it's great. I think expansion is great. I think the more teams that get to play, great. And the more teams that play, hopefully you have, sort of undisputed, the best team in the country is the one that fights through them all and wins the whole thing. And that's kind of what you want. You want the representative of the NCAA championship to be the truly the best player, and you want more people to get an opportunity to play. So I think it's a great thing.
And I think it would be a great thing to help grow the game, just because instead of a quick little mini tournament, we've got more teams battling it out. And you mentioned the upsets that happened. UCLA did get upset against Stanford, and then Stanford lost to Pepperdine in the MPSF championship. And then Santa Barbara obviously fell to Hawaii in the Big West Conference semifinals. And then Purdue of Fort Wayne made that miraculous run to face its interstate rival Ball State. Those were some notable teams that kind of got left out from the tournament, and as well as NJIT, of course. But I totally agree. Penn State should have probably made the tournament just because they had such an outstanding year, and their body of work kind of shows for it. So, that's actually a good segue to go into Penn State as a whole. So obviously Mark Pavlik is the head coach. What's your relationship like with him, and what do you like about Mark Pavlik as a head coach?
Oh man, Mark Pavlik's an incredible human being. Just one of the most generous guys that I know. So I went to the Penn State volleyball camp in 1996, my junior year. And Pav was the coach. Pav was an assistant in '94. When they won the championship, and I think he started being the head coach in '95. And I think my dates are close or right. If they're not right, they're close. But '96, I went as a camper, and I was on the first court, and I don't know. I coach camp, and I try to meet every camper and know every name, and it's hard for me. And 2 years later, I'm playing at Vassar. We're playing Penn State. And he shook my hand. He said, "Oh, Sam, good to see you're doing so well. I remember you from camp." I'm like, "Oh my God, this guy is amazing. So genuine, so kind, so thoughtful, and so much about growing the game." I mean, that guy obviously lives and breathes Penn State volleyball, and his life's mission is to make it the best possible team it can be. But he is the godfather of certainly East Coast volleyball. I mean, he's the guy that we all look to and sort of look for direction on how to do this profession. But when I got to Princeton in 2009, I was coaching with the women at the time, and we were going down to play Penn State, and he took me out to lunch, and he just put his arm around me. He said, "Look, whatever I can do to help you, the better you get, the better it makes the IVA, and the better we get." And he stayed true to that. We got better, and he's just always saying, what can I do to help? What do you need? He's just a mensch through and through, just an incredible guy. And, I try to mimic a lot of the things that I do in our program after the way I think he would do them, because he just does it the right way. And I don't think there's a guy in volleyball that has more respect for the class and the way he operates. He's just top notch across the board.
All right, a couple more questions just because it is nearing 10 p.m. on the East Coast as of this recording. So, who have been some of your more memorable players you've coached at Penn State, or not Penn State, Princeton, and why? Who have been some of your most memorable players you've coached at Princeton, and why? Yeah.
Oh man, the list is long. I'll start at the beginning, but there's so many. I mean, Michael Dye was a freshman my first year here, and so him and Pat Schwagler, I mean, that's a special group that you kind of get to go through it together. Those guys definitely butted heads with me and ran me through the ringer. But, getting to develop relationships with them as we've gotten older. I got to officiate Mike's wedding, which was really cool. He married a girl that played volleyball here, Nicole Kincaid, and getting to marry them last year was a really special thing. Davis Waddell, Brad Howard, Jeff Stapleton, that was my first recruiting class in 2011. And, got to go to Brad's wedding last summer, going to be at Davis's wedding this coming summer. And those guys have been really special to me. Cody Kessel, Will Soroki, Tony Ensbury, that next class really helps kind of put Princeton on the path for what we were trying to achieve. Cody Kessel's definitely our most decorated, post-Princeton athlete, played professionally in Germany now, I think 6, 7, maybe even 8 years. He graduated in 2015. But just an incredible guy that just lives and breathes and loves volleyball. He's playing on in Germany right now and in Berlin for a really talented team, playing on the national team. He was on the national team this summer in Brazil when they beat Brazil, played on the team there, and he's just a great guy. So there's just so many. I could go on, but so many guys that I've coached, had the privilege of coaching over the years here, that I'm just really fortunate to have them in my life and to have those relationships. And I'm excited to keep building more and more. Like I said, Jonah May, Devin Stearns, there's just a lot of guys that have come through that I really, really cherish. Corey Short, Kendall Ratter, Billy Andrew. Like I could go on and on. I don't want to leave anybody out. There's so many if I could name them all, I would.
Absolutely. And I did see in your little coaching bio that you had a couple players say great things about you, not just as a coach, but as a human being as well. And if you were ever coached by Sam Shweisky, then he obviously did not mean to leave you out. He obviously acknowledges you. So, okay, last question. What advice would you have for other uprising coaches that are getting their first ever start, whether it's on the high school level, the junior high level, or the junior college level, the junior high level, the collegiate level, the professional level? What advice would you have for other coaches that are on the rise or that are in their infancy stages as a head coach?
I think, be around as much volleyball as you can. Men's, women's, college, club, high school, anything. Just be around it and talk about it. Go to the national championships, go to the ACA convention, watch volleyball and talk about it with your peers, with people. Say, hey, what did you see there? And why are they running that offense? And what do you think about this? And as you're developing your belief systems and the way you see the game, hold true to your convictions, but keep an open mind. And anytime someone says oh, do you notice the way they block? And be like, oh, I didn't notice that. Let me watch the next few games and think about it that way. Because I just think that there's not, the more you have success, sometimes you can have blind spots and the game can change and evolve and adapt. And, I think it's important for people to stay nimble and agile. And remember that forgetting about the X's and O's, we coach people, right? This is a customer service business. And so, developing relationships, that's the work that I think is important, because you may be the brightest coach in the world and have the best message, but if you can't convince the people you're working with to buy what you're selling, you're never going to get anywhere. And so I think watch as much volleyball as you can, be inquisitive, talk, be humble, be open, listen, and get excited for a good ride, because it's a great sport to be a part of.
Excellent advice. Couldn't have said it better on your end, Sam. But thank you very much for being a guest here on Set Point. Before I give you a proper goodbye, we're going to go to a commercial break. When we come back, I'll be discussing the top NCAA men's volleyball matches to watch for this week, as well as some NCAA women's volleyball coaching changes and NCAA women's volleyball transfers. So keep it locked here. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always willing to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Thank you to Sam Shweisky for basically being on the show and being a guest. Obviously, it wasn't easy considering, well, for starters, it's very late up at the East Coast, down the East Coast. But overall, I appreciate Sam for being a guest on the show, and I definitely appreciate him tuning in, or for being a guest. And thank you to those that listened in. But with all that said and done, let's jump on into some more NCAA men's volleyball action. But first and foremost, we have to go over the IE Sports Radio read. So IE Sports Radio can be found on several different streaming platforms, such as Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, or social media platforms, at IE Sports Radio. We also have a Facebook page for those that still use Facebook. Just type in IE Sports Radio in the search bar, and then you will see us. So after that, we have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and when you go at the top, you'll see a Patreon link, which starts at $5 a month. This will get you a shout from all of our amazing shows, including this one, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Because for the past 8 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we continue to be by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. Shout out to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Key to the Gate, Marcus Losgrade, and a donor that wishes to remain anonymous. So with all that said and done, let's get back into the volleyball action. So NCAA men's volleyball starts this week. It starts on Wednesday, and I've already got your week 1 matches to watch for. I'll also be releasing a video of it, a little 2-minute 20 video, just because everyone here wanted to basically they wanted me to give a little preview out, just like on the women's side, even though I didn't do that sort of thing, but I digress. So the first matchup to watch for in week 1 is LMU, no, not Loyola Marymount, Lincoln Memorial at Pepperdine. That'll be a 7 p.m. Pacific start time. I really want to go to this game, but unfortunately I am just so stacked with business all over the place, so sadly I can't make it to this game. I really want to go, but unfortunately I have other things happening, so I'll have to pass on this one. But if you're in the area, definitely go to LMU, Lincoln Memorial versus Pepperdine. It's the first match of the NCAA men's volleyball season, and I almost forgot about this, but thankfully someone was kind enough to basically correct me and say, hey, you forgot about this little matchup on Wednesday. So that is the first match of the NCAA men's volleyball season. In terms of Division I and Division II, or National Collegiate Volleyball, because there is no Division I or Division II. It's just NC men's volleyball, but I digress. I'm just going to call it NCAA men's volleyball because you could fight me on it otherwise. Anyway, on Thursday, we have USC at UC Santa Barbara. That's going to be a 3 p.m. Pacific start time. So this matchup is unique. USC and UC Santa Barbara both lost a lot of talented players from last year's team. This is going to be quite fascinating to watch for just because it's going to basically see who's going to be able to survive within said team's conference. USC had a phenomenal year last year. They finished second in the MPSF, only to lose in the semifinals to Pepperdine, as I discussed with Sam in our interview. UC Santa Barbara also had a phenomenal year, losing to the host team, Hawaii, in the Big West Conference men's volleyball tournament semifinals. So this is going to be a matchup between two teams that are going to try to get back on track and try to rebuild from the ground up. I wouldn't say maybe rebuild, but probably like reload. Then on Friday, we have a couple of notable matchups. We have the mini BYU tournament, or the EIVA versus the West Coast Swing thing. I'm just going to call it the BYU tournament. We have Lewis versus UC Irvine at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. This is going to be an interesting match. UC Irvine is really going to be good this year, and they have the toughest schedule according to their head coach, David Niffen, but they have a lot of stacked players on their team, and I really think that this team can go deep. Lewis is going to be quite an interesting team just because they returned a good chunk of their players, but they do lose out on Tyler Mitchum, who is their All-American from last year. But I think UC Irvine should be challenged in that matchup just because Lewis is a pretty good team perennially. I mean, they didn't really have the success that they did last year, but more often than not, they're always a good team. And I think Lewis is going to try to pick up the pieces and try to be more than a one-man wrecking crew. I don't want to see, in any way, shape, or form, one man trying to play hero ball. None of that. If I see that, then I will have a problem with that. The later matchup in the BYU tournament is McKendree at BYU at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So here's the little deal on McKendree. So they lost their two-headed monster from last season, as they're going to look to try to play BYU. And BYU, they're going to be in quite the rebuild mode. So honestly, it's going to be quite interesting to see how McKendree does against BYU. They do have some good returning players, but BYU, it's going to be so different playing in that gymnasium. But for BYU, it's going to be they're going to have such a young team. A lot of young players. It's going to be quite the rebuild, honestly. And for me, it's just going to be so tricky for the Cougars to win this one. But they have a good shot. I think that could be a pick-em right there. But for me, I would think McKendree has a little bit more firepower. But we'll see what happens with BYU. They obviously lost David. No, it was someone else. It wasn't the David Gardini, but it was another player that they had that was definitely talented. But either way, I'm hoping to see what the Cougars have in store for us. I think they definitely have some potential, but at the same time, it's just going to be quite tough if you ask me. And for BYU, it could be a long season with some growing pains. And yeah, David Gardini. So that was the player they lost. And they also lost Alex Hasu. So mainly freshmen and sophomores, but we'll see what their future has in store. Or this season might be a preview for BYU's future. We'll see what happens. And then as for McKendree, you definitely got to keep an eye out for a good chunk of their players, as McKendree has Francisco Comas, who is their leading libero from last year, Kevin Shuley, Daniel Duggan, and then Tyler Polson, as well as Jacob Gall and Cesar Contreras. And like I said, there are key losses for Ryan Serrano, their setter, Ethan Carroll, and Patrick Ross. So I think McKendree still has some good potential on their team. It's just probably going to take some getting used to without Carroll and Ross and Serrano. So there's that for BYU. Jumping over to Saturday, we have a full slate on Saturday. Continuing with the BYU tournament, we have McKendree versus UC Irvine. So again, this is going to be an uphill climb. This will probably be the uphill climb for McKendree. UC Irvine, they return a really big portion of their team. They only lost like 4 or 5 seniors, and for me, I think that's going to be where they have so much potential. And again, with this tough schedule that they have on their dish, I think it's going to really benefit them before Big West Conference play, because they need to be battle-tested come Big West Conference play time. So it's quite the interesting matchup right there for McKendree versus UC Irvine. And then the following matchup, that's a 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time matchup. And then Lewis versus BYU, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time matchup. Lewis, again, like I said, Lewis returns a lot of talented players, and BYU is just going to be so young, so Lewis might get the better of the Cougars, but again, I would not be surprised if BYU just somehow got a big boost of energy from their talented players, or from their young talented players. Like, they have a good young core. It's just that Lewis is probably going to be overpowering in terms of returning talent on their team. So for Lewis, this one might be a win. Again, this is going to probably be those growing pains that I talked about in terms of BYU, but I think this is good experience for them going into the future and going into MPSF play for this year. Also on Saturday, we have UCLA at UC Santa Barbara at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that's going to be a late game. And for you East Coasters that watch this game, salute to you. But for UCLA, they have some other matchups on the slate. They also play Northridge, and they also should play UC San Diego, which is a part of the ASICS Challenge. But for UC Santa Barbara, again, it's another tough matchup against UCLA, which returns a lot of their players. They returned so much talent from that team last year, so many All-Americans, MPSF honors. Like, this is going to be quite the tricky matchup for Santa Barbara. But if they're able to at least take a set off of UCLA, that should be a win on its own. So it's going to be one of those seasons where UC Santa Barbara is going to be looking for its identity to reestablish itself as one of the top teams in the Big West. Whereas UCLA, they've got a lot of unfinished business to attend to. Obviously, they only lost Cole Pender and Kevin Coburn, but I think for UCLA, they should be able to come out of this weekend with a perfect record. Just my opinion. And then on Saturday, we have NJIT at Purdue Fort Wayne. That's a 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time start. So for NJIT, they also return a lot of their players in terms of the EIVA. They really can pose a threat. And Purdue Fort Wayne, it's going to take a while for the Mastodons to actually be as good as they were last year, because last year Purdue Fort Wayne was so amazing. And like I mentioned it with Sam, basically they had such a great run through the MIVA, but unfortunately they just fell short of winning the championship over a very talented Ball State. So for them, it's going to be a little tough just because NJIT, they have such a good roster. They have such a great, talented roster. For NJIT, their notable returners to keep an eye out for are Julian Meisner, Alessandro Negri, Jens Feldthus, Martin De Chavaria, Carson Williams, and then other notable players are Griffin Feisler and Roque Nido. And their only true question mark is their libero. So for me, that's kind of going to be something to watch for in terms of NJIT, because I think that team has potential. It's just that it's going to be all about, can they put all the pieces together before EIVA play starts. And then as for Purdue Fort Wayne, John Didrich is definitely a player to watch for. Outside hitter / opposite. This dude was a beast. He was All-American honorable mention, All-MIVA first team. And then other players to watch for are Bryce Walker, Zach Solomon, and Sergio Carrillo. And like I mentioned last week, Carlos Mercado, outside hitter / opposite, another player to watch for. And then Axel Melendez, a 6'9" outside hitter. He's definitely also someone to watch for. He's only a sophomore. So for Purdue Fort Wayne, this is what they got to do. They expect another 6-2 offense just because even though they just lost Sean Califf to graduation, they did get Sergio Carrillo, who was who was a part of that North Greenville historic season from last year. I say historic quite loosely just because they only made it past the first round and they lost in the quarterfinals. Nothing against that. It's just that Hawaii kind of brought them back down to reality. But overall, getting Sergio Carrillo is huge for their team just because he and Zach Solomon can run the 6-2 offense. And Carrillo totaled 903 assists from last year's team, and he also was third on the team in digs with 141. So for Purdue Fort Wayne, I think they have that potential. It's just going to be all about building around John Didrich, just because he cannot be number one guy trying to carry the team night in and night out. That's just not going to work. And then also they're going to need to reestablish their libero after losing Troy Gooch to graduation. So that's that for that little matchup right there. And then this matchup, I think this is the match of the week. Nothing against the other matchups, but I think this is match of the week. Penn State at Ohio State, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time matchup, which is basically 1 p.m. for those on the West Coast. Oh, I'm looking forward to this matchup. So normally this would be a Big Ten matchup, but since Ohio State and Penn State are not in, there is no Big Ten in men's volleyball. It's just EIVA and MIVA. It doesn't really have that same feel, but this is definitely going to be a fun matchup right here between the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions. I think this is going to be really fun. I think Penn State with all their returning talent and Ohio State being on the rise with all of their returning talent, it's going to be an extremely great matchup to watch for. And you definitely got to check that out. I imagine it might be on the Big Ten Network. I don't know that for a fact, but I really think that it's going to be a great matchup. This is one of those matchups that you don't want to miss if you are able to get to a said TV or if you're able to attend this matchup at Covelli Center, just because Ohio State has lots of potential this year. They have dubious immortality, especially after the promise they showed last year. And then Penn State, obviously, they have unfinished business to attend to. And obviously for Penn State, they have Brett Wildman, Cal Fisher, Toby Ezionu, Cole Bogner, Sam Marsh, and Michael Valenzi. And then the other player to watch for is Ryan Merck, who is their only libero on the team, which is yikes. And then their only key loss last year was Will Bantle, and as long as Penn State stays healthy, they can definitely make their way back into the NCAA tournament. Or at least the EIVA semifinals or finals. I'm sure they'll at least get to the final. Like, last year obviously was tough losing to Princeton, but I think that Penn State does have a lot of momentum, and, not momentum, but they have a little bit of a void to fill after they left a lot of meat on the bone from last year, and they know that they're much better than what last year's ending dictated. And then for Ohio State, they have Jacob Pastor, Samuel Clark, Noah Platfoot, Cole Young to watch for on their team. And then their other players to watch for are Thomas Poole and Jimmy Webb. Jimmy Webb, I've seen play in his days at high school, at Edison High School, and at Orange Coast College. And then Thomas Poole is the libero. He still returns. He's probably going to be taking over libero duties. And then their only key loss, in my opinion, was Martin Lallement. And then, like I said last week, they have some good returning pieces from last year, and they can contend the MIVA. But for right now, I want to see how they can do against Penn State. This is a great matchup to start off with right off the bat. They do have a match the day before, but for me, Ohio State is ready and should be ready and willing. And the fact that they're going to be playing at Covelli Center should give them even more motivation. I know Penn State and Ohio State aren't like true rivals. I mean, there is some sort of rivalry just because of Big Ten purposes, but it's not like Michigan versus Ohio State or Minnesota versus Wisconsin or any of that sort. Not that I'm trying to discredit this as a rivalry match. I'm just saying that this doesn't have the greatest rivalry just because it's not really Big Ten, but it kind of just has that Big Ten feel. It has some sort of Big Ten feel, and I think it's a great little mini rivalry match. So that's that for all my volleyball matches to watch for in week one. If you all think that there are other matches to watch for that I might have missed, just because there is no set NCAA men's volleyball schedule on the NCAA website, just let me know in the YouTube comment section or any of the comment section. So that is that for the NCAA men's volleyball week one matchups to watch for. Before I continue, I actually made a little bit of a mistake last week, and I am kicking myself for some of these mistakes. So last week, I do need to give a shout out to Barry in Hawaii. This person right here managed to catch a couple of mistakes that I made last week, as I can't really go back to edit this, but I digress. So Barry in Hawaii told me in the comment section on YouTube, Hawaii's Jakob Telle was a junior in the COVID year, or a junior last year, and he's going to be a senior this season. And first of all, I do take ownership of that. I own up to that, and I do apologize for messing that up. I first of all checked if he was correct, which this person obviously was, and I felt really stupid. I'm like, oh no, I can't believe I messed that up. So I do apologize just because COVID is a thing, and I kind of lose track of which players are eligible and ineligible, or not ineligible or eligible, but in terms of like eligibility, in terms of like the athletic eligibility. And then in addition, he also says, or Barry also says, Chaz Galloway says he's not returning next year as he's a senior. And then he also believes that Ka'ana'i Akana, Cole Hoagland, Brett Sheward, Alakai Todd, and Philip Humler, as well as Tele, all graduated in 2022 from Hawaii, and they are all fifth-year players this season due to COVID. So I messed up on most of that, and I do apologize. I was hyping up Hawaii, thinking that they're going to be good for the next 2 years, but they should still be good this year. This is probably their last dance. So in my defense of that second comment, well, first of all, thank you to Barry for noting that out. If I ever make a mistake, or if I just say something that's incorrect, do let me know, whether it's on Twitter via setpoint at set_point.ie, or on YouTube or anywhere else. Just try to be respectful. Don't say, "Oh, you freaking messed this one up. You're a dummy." Just be respectful. Just say a little bit of a error on your part. Just say it with kindness and respect. Don't just say it like you're a jerk. Like, this person was nice enough to point out the mistake, and I just said my bad about Tele, and I think that's quite interesting that he was able to also tell me this. So thank you to Barry in Hawaii for catching that little mistake, and I'll try not to make it ever again. I mean, no one's really perfect, so I'm sorry to those that I let down. I'm sorry to Hawaii for messing that up. I'll definitely be careful, and I pride myself in trying to be as careful as possible, as well as with accuracy. Okay, so that's that for that little backtrack of a miscue right there from Hawaii's men's volleyball team from last week. All right, now we got to get into some NCAA women's volleyball transfer and coaching news. So we'll start off with the coaching news. So in terms of coaching news, we only had 2 new hires. So we'll start off with Kansas State. So Kansas State recently hired Jason Mansfield as their new head coach. Mansfield spent 5 seasons at Washington as an assistant coach, as he was part of that Final Four run during the COVID season, and he also led them, and he was also part of the 2 straight Elite 8 appearances in 2019 and during the COVID season, aka spring of 2021. He also was a part of the Washington teams that made it to the Sweet 16 4 straight times from 2018 all the way to the fall of 2021. And then last year, obviously it was a tough year for Washington just because of injuries and whatnot, but he obviously learned well under Keegan Cook and the other assistant coach that was just recently hired as the women's volleyball coach at Washington. As I think Jason Mansfield can definitely do wonders for Kansas State. Kansas State obviously had a little bit of a rough year, but a few of their notable wins were against Iowa State, which I thought is quite impressive. So I think for Kansas State, they can definitely build off this. And having that experience under Keegan Cook and having that experience, even though it was only 5 years, I think having that experience at Washington is definitely going to help him going forward. And then the other hire in terms of the NCAA women's volleyball coaching world is Trent Kersten, as he was hired by LMU. So Kersten is one of the more up-and-rising young volleyball coaches in NCAA women's volleyball. He actually spent 5 years with San Jose State prior to coming to LMU, as he helped turn the program around in 2021. So the first 2 years weren't really the best years. The first year he guided them to a record above 500, and then the last 2 years, including the COVID season, it was a little bit forgettable. But in 2021, he guided the Spartans to a 19-10 record, which was the 19 wins were actually the most in 15 years, which that's quite incredible if you ask me. I mean, most people are probably going to say, "Oh, 19 wins, who cares?" Well, it's tough when you're in a non-Power 5 conference, and obviously San Jose State, they have to deal with like other teams trying to get their recruits, like Stanford and maybe Cal, and then the other California schools like UC Davis, UCLA, USC, that sort of thing. So for San Jose State to have that big of a turnaround when having to compete with some of the other teams, not just within their conference, but within their state, it's quite amazing. And in addition to that 19-10 record, they went 13-5 in the Mountain West Conference, which actually marked the most wins for San Jose State in the Mountain West Conference, which I think that's quite incredible. I mean, obviously when you think of the Mountain West Conference, you think of Colorado State and UNLV and maybe San Diego State and Utah State for this year. But for San Jose State to have that turnaround after 3 years of unfortunate events, it is basically... It's quite amazing, if you ask me. So, hats off to Trent Kersten on that season. But it gets better for Trent Kersten. So, last season, Kersten guided the Spartans to a 21-10 record. So, remember that 19-10 record, or 20? It was 21-9, not 21-10. So, 21-9 record last season, and Kersten. Remember that 19-10 record from 2021, well, he took that up a notch as he won 2 more games, and you could thank the NIVC for allowing San Jose State to basically have, I think, 1 more match. As in addition to going 21-10, they also went 14-4 in the Mountain West Conference this season, and they finished second in the Mountain West Conference overall. So for San Jose State, that's quite incredible. So basically, the past 2 seasons were Trent Kersten's amazing seasons that with San Jose State. You can't really give justification for the previous 3 seasons, especially with the COVID season. But for Trent Kersten, I think this was a great hire for LMU. The only negative that comes out of this is for San Jose State. They no longer have a head coach, and this is kind of comparable to the UNLV situation where Don Sullivan went to Missouri. But for LMU, this is kind of a whole different situation, as Kersten goes to an LMU team that made the NCAA tournament, even though they were one of the last 4 in, and that they also were able to hang tough in the competitive West Coast Conference. They took San Diego to 5 both times. They beat Pepperdine both times. And then they hung tough with BYU, I think it was the second time. But either way, LMU did impressive work in that conference. And their only other loss in that conference outside of BYU and San Diego was to San Francisco, which was surging at the time. But for Trent Kersten, this is huge for him, and I think that he can do wonders for this program. If he was able to turn around San Jose State in the previous 2 seasons, which saw drastic improvement, I think LMU is in for a treat with Trent Kersten, and especially when the press release said that he was one of the rising young coaches in volleyball. And I think that's a promising sign, and I really think that LMU can turn it around. Now, it's all going to be about who they have returning and who they can get from the transfer portal and who commits to LMU, and depending on how many players San Diego loses to the transfer portal and to graduation, as well as BYU and Pepperdine and all the other teams in the West Coast Conference, it's all going to depend about that. But LMU, I think they did a good job with this hire. He's also a former UCLA men's volleyball player, as he played for John Speraw, and I think Trent Kersten is in good hands with LMU, or LMU is in good hands with Trent Kersten. So the only negative is that, unfortunately, once again, San Jose State is going to need to find a new head coach, but I'm sure they've got lots of good options ahead. All right, so that is that for all the NCAA women's volleyball coaching news. Now we got to get on into the NCAA women's volleyball transfer news. In terms of the notable transfers, so last week we had Jess Mruzik, outside hitter for Michigan, enter the transfer portal. So in case you're keeping score, Michigan has all 3 of its top 3 kill leaders in the transfer portal: Jess Robinson, May Pertovsky, and Jess Mruzik. And this is quite big for Michigan because now they're going to have to hire a new head. Well, I think they hired a new head coach. Either way, they're going to be under a new head coach. They're losing their 3 top kill leaders. It's going to be a little bit of a rebuild year for Michigan. And Michigan, unfortunately, missed the NCAA tournament after they had a little bit of promise, especially with beating Penn State or sweeping Penn State. But for Jess Mruzik, she's definitely going to make an impact for whichever team she lands with. So keep an eye out for Jess Mruzik. She has entered the portal, and she will be looking to go elsewhere. But someone that did find a home was Reagan Hope, as she transfers from Oregon to UCLA, but she'll be playing beach volleyball. So that's kind of big right there. And UCLA has a rich tradition, so obviously she as well as UCLA saw something within one another to basically go there. And I'm going to be interested to see how she'll contribute to that team. I think she can contribute quite nicely. She's only a sophomore, so keep an eye out for her. Also, heading to the DMV, we have Samantha Schnida, who is an opposite. a junior opposite. She'll be transferring from Ole Miss to Maryland, as she was 5th in kills with the Rebels last year. And, Ole Miss had a rough year last year. Obviously, it could have been a better year, but I think she's going to contribute well with Maryland. They did also get another player back from the transfer portal, but I'll be discussing that a little bit later. They also got another player as well, but more on that later. Jumping back into the portal, we have Missouri's dig leader from last year, Mangual Duran, who normally plays outside hitter, but I imagine she had to play libero just because of Missouri's purposes or what their coach wanted. But Leandra Mangual Duran, graduate student who is an outside hitter, she is now entering the transfer portal. I'm going to be interested to see how she impacts the team, whether it's as the libero or the outside hitter. Here's the thing about Missouri. Obviously, they hired Dawn Sullivan, but this is their 5th player in the transfer portal. For the 5th player that transferred. So, again, Missouri is going to have quite the rebuild on their hands. But if anyone can lead them to success, it's Dawn Sullivan. I mean, look at what she did with UNLV. But another transfer from Missouri into the portal, not really ideal. Then we have Aubrey O'Gorman, who is making the transition to beach volleyball. So she transfers from Michigan State as she'll be heading to LSU, which I think is big time right there, just because LSU obviously has a rich tradition with Kristen Nuss and Taryn Cloth. I think it's big for LSU to get this player. I think she'll transition just fine. I mean, obviously, it's never easy to go from indoor to beach, but if anyone can do it, she can. Going back to players entering the transfer portal, we have Audrey Klemp, outside hitter / opposite, who is a graduate student at LMU. So I just discussed the recent hiring of Trent Kersten, but this might be because of a possible LMU does not have enough scholarships, or LMU does not have the correct graduate program for Klemp. So she is entering the transfer portal, and I'm sure she'll do wonders. She had 202 kills last year, so everyone on LMU had 200, or 5 players had 200 or more kills on LMU, but no one had more than 300. They didn't have any 300 or better. But anyway, Klemp should be able to make an impact to whichever team that she goes to, and we'll see what happens after she transfers from LMU. Then, going from one school to another, is Kyla Swanson, as she put up solid numbers with Illinois. She is a middle blocker, and she will be transferring from Illinois to Auburn, which I think is big, just because Auburn had a great season last year. They made it to the round of 32. They narrowly lost to Houston, and she comes from an Illinois team which obviously they missed the NCAA tournament last year. Not trying to bash that or anything, but I think this is going to be a great little culture change, just because Brent Crouch, the former USC coach, who coached I think for 1 or 2 seasons, is really turning that program around. And I think Kyle Swanson is buying into what Brent Crouch wants. And then this little transfer right here, she is a setter who transfers from Flagler, which I don't think anyone knows where that is, as Kennedy Muff transfers from Flagler to Florida. So for Kennedy Muff, she put up solid numbers last year. She had 243 digs, 68 blocks, 137 kills, and she was Flagler's setter from last year. Now, silly me, I didn't know Florida will never, ever, or hardly ever run a 6-2 offense. And I thought this was going to possibly be a 6-2 offense with Alexis Stuckey, but that's probably not going to happen. So I'm going to be interested to see what Kennedy Muff will do. Obviously, Alexis Stuckey is going to be leading the team next year, but I don't know. I wouldn't really hold my breath on her being part of a 6-2 offense, but we'll see. Time will tell with Mary Wise. Going back to Maryland, they managed to pick up Lily Gunter from Mississippi State. She had 453 digs as she is a senior libero, and that's quite big for Maryland. Maryland had a solid year. It's just that they just didn't have too many big-time wins. They had that win over Ohio State, but unfortunately, that was kind of where the buck stopped. She averaged four digs per set. Yeah, a little more than 4 digs per set, and she had 453, which I think is quite a lot. So And she didn't even play in the NCAA tournament for Mississippi State. So I think that's a great little pickup for Maryland, getting her from the transfer portal. And that's actually a perfect segue to go to another Maryland player who actually is not in the transfer portal anymore. This is Lila Ricks, who actually entered the transfer portal for Maryland, but now she has exited the transfer portal and she will be returning to Maryland. So that is big time right there. And she even said on her Twitter, she said, excited to continue learning and growing as a person and a player as a Terp, which is huge right there. She contributed great numbers off the bench for Maryland, and I think this is going to be great. It's kind of like what Anna Dodson did with UCLA. So for her to return home, well, not return home, but return to her school, it's quite amazing, and I think it's a great decision on her part. Going over to Big 12 country, we have Jordan Schilling transferring from West Virginia, as she is actually going to High Point University. So I actually had the honor of knowing Jordan Schilling and seeing her play volleyball at Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana, California. And she actually can play multiple positions. She's listed as a libero/defensive specialist, but she also could play outside hitter. I've seen her set a couple times. The only position I don't think she'll be playing anytime soon is middle blocker. So I think she's a great Swiss Army knife, and I'm interested to see how she'll do at High Point. And she's also got a good serve as well. Speaking of other players that I have seen on the high school level, Natalia Hagopian is transferring from Northeastern to Indiana, which I think is big for Indiana. So Natalia Hagopian, she is quite the setter. She kind of reminds me of a female Jakob Telle, and I think she could do wonders for the Hoosiers, the Lady Hoosiers. And I don't know how good Northeastern is in terms of their women's volleyball program, but I think going to Indiana is going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be quite good just because Indiana, they had a good season last year. Unfortunately, they were kind of in the same boat Maryland was, and they just didn't have the good amount of wins in order to make the NCAA tournament. I mean, they had the strength of schedule in terms of the Big Ten, but that was kind of where the buck stopped. So Natalia Hagopian, she has the potential to play right side as well, and she also has the ability to just have these strong dump kills, and she's just a great Swiss Army knife. So I really think that Indiana got a good one right here in terms of Natalia Hagopian. She played volleyball in high school at Laguna Beach High, and I saw her in one of her matches, and she was just all over the place. Like, my goodness. And then today, before I go on into today, there was another transfer that I missed from last week, and this was actually reported on Wednesday. So Trista Strasser, one of Missouri's former players, she actually is transferring from Missouri to Grand Canyon, and I am kicking myself for missing this transfer. So Trista Strasser will be heading to WAC country, or Western Athletic country, from SEC country, as she actually performed really well for Missouri last year. She had 111 blocks, and she had 103 kills, which was good for fourth on the team. So all these former Missouri players are finding homes, and I think Trista Strasser is going to do great things for Grand Canyon. I think she could do wonders for that team, and she's kind of a hidden gem in my opinion. I'm not saying that just because she follows me on Twitter. I'm saying that just because I think her numbers get buried just because Missouri just didn't get the same love and respect that some of these other SEC teams got. And I think Trista Strasser is a fantastic player who I think is going to do wonders for Grand Canyon. And who knows, maybe she can get Grand Canyon over the hump, or at least be one of the players that Grand Canyon gets over the hump. And then also we had Caitlin Buettner, who transfers from Texas State. She's a senior outside hitter, and she'll be transferring to Iowa as she chipped in 270 kills for the Bobcats? Yeah, the Bobcats. And she also chipped in 148 digs, as she was third on the team in kills last year for Texas State behind Janelle Fitzgerald and one other person. So I think it's solid for Iowa to get Caitlin Buettner. I think they can build off that. Again, they have to deal with all the other talented teams from the Big Ten. But overall, I think this is a good step in the right direction for Iowa. And now for this big news that I actually reported on the Twitterverse. So former Florida setter, Bertie Hendrickson, I predicted she was going to go follow Merritt Beeson over to Nebraska. That is not true, and I am wrong about that. She actually committed today to Pepperdine, which that's huge right there. So she is a setter and opposite, and she appeared in some matches before Alexis Stuckey kind of took the setter position from under her nose. But overall for Birdie Hendrickson, this is huge right there, just because you got to remember, Pepperdine is losing Isabel Zayala or Zalea to graduation, and they're in need of a setter, and I think she could do wonders, and she has experience having been coached from the Mary Wise. So for Birdie Hendrickson, she is going to a very talented Pepperdine team that returns a good chunk of its players, such as Grace Chillingworth, Meg Brown, Emma Ammerman, Emily Helmuth, the West Coast Conference Freshman of the Year. I think she made the correct decision. Their only big question mark is their libero. And like I said, I think Trinity Stanger is going to be the libero. If not, maybe Lane Briggs, the incoming freshman that I've covered back in her high school days. But I digress on that. All right, and that is basically going to do it for all the notable transfers. Like I said in the past, there's probably a lot of transfers out there, but I don't want to bore you all, and I'll only go over some of the notables. But if you think there is a transfer that I should keep my eye out for, let me know in the comment section, and let me know on Twitter at @set_point.ie. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everyone tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen on a remote location, on a deserted island, if you listen at work, if you listen the wee hours of the morning, I definitely appreciate you. Thank you so much to Sam Shweisky for being my guest. Next week, I actually have another guest lined up, as CJ Shearer, the Life University men's volleyball coach, is going to be joining me as a guest. For those that are wondering who that is, Life University is actually a NAIA school, and we're going to probably be discussing NAIA volleyball. And it's sure to be a fun time. So for Sam Shweisky, my guest, and for everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Happy belated New Year to everybody. Let's make 2023 our year, and definitely keep on the lookout for all the big news for Set Point. I will see everybody on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great week, and let's see some big-time NCAA men's volleyball. Peace!